I am Andrew Ryan, and I'm here to ask you a question.
In this industry that recycles the same 3 settings to nauseam, Bioshock stands among very few IPs that consistently produce a sense of place distinctly like nowhere you've seen before. While there is plenty to criticize about these games, I have to give credit to this franchise for being so dedicated to making worlds that boldly break the mold. More often than not, a game setting can be linked to either a real-life counterpart or a fictitious analog, either a specific work or a subgenre from which it pulls the majority of its essence. Obviously, San Andreas is just California, Kyrat is Nepal, most fantasy games are amalgams of Tolkien's elements, Deus Ex and Cyberpunk are derivatives of Blade Runner, not to mention the daunting variety of games that hop on the post-apocalyptic train, zombies, nukes, bioweapons, all things that are abundantly prevalent throughout the past century of fiction. And I'm not calling these out, by the way. I can't tell you how many times I've watched a movie and thought, damn, this world is cool, I wish I could explore it. Video games give us the closest thing, and the way I see it, movies and games can pull from one another at the peril of neither, because by effect they promote each other. A Fallout 3 fan is more likely to watch The Book of Eli and vice versa. But Jambo, this video is about Bioshock, you goddamn lizard! So if Rage 2 is Mad Max and Elder Scrolls is Middle Earth, then what is Rapture? Sure, it pulls philosophically from Atlas Shrugged, or perhaps even Atlantis, but Rapture doesn't really fit the description of either of those, and for that matter, what about Columbia? These settings can't really be called derivatives of any movie or book that I'm aware of, and for that I have to respect them for being as original as they are tantalizing. These raw concepts are creative gems to begin with, but my curiosity is really harvested by how these worlds concoct culture shocks through divergent societal ethics and technologies. More importantly, Bioshock never fully pulls back the curtain. It makes a careful discipline out of the pace with which it introduces and submerges you into its world. We tend to think that our experience of a game starts and ends with what's on the disc, but really so much of that foundation is owed to how we were first introduced to it on a level that's often external to the actual game files. The first teaser trailer is usually trivial in terms of subject matter, but leaves a lasting impression in the way of tone, and it can be woefully off-putting when the final product diverts from that tonal baseline, because these expository moments, however small, have an enormous contingency on what the player feels as they approach the game. Much of our introduction to Columbia happened by way of these live-action, bite-sized mockumentaries. They felt like a late-night Discovery Channel production, analyzing these little artifacts that had fallen from the city in the sky, now faded into myth.
In March of 1981, a mysterious building was found high in the Alps. A building that had fallen out of the sky.
It put me in the shoes of an outsider in the mundane, normal world trying to comprehend what little I could about this elusive spectacle. I think by design, this so fittingly mirrored the perspective of fans clamoring to get a better glimpse of the game. A good developer paired with the right publisher can make a memorable experience out of the season leading up to their game. And to this day, the Truth from Legend campaign comes to mind as perhaps the best example, because it made the act of finally setting foot in the mythical Columbia feel like a long-awaited revelatory moment. And the mystery never fully clarifies, because mystery is the bread and butter of Bioshock. I still don't quite understand the synthetic and/or anatomical nature of a Big Daddy or Songbird or any other animate contraption that makes for a similar encounter. It might be buried deep in the lore or in some document you can find in the game world, but the duration for which the player is left to wonder really cooks these mysteries into feasts for the imagination. Plasmids, little sisters, and the various elements that are mundane in these worlds all do their part to create places that are as realized as they are alien. These games largely owe this creative direction to Ken Levine, the game's director. After Bioshock Infinite released, Levine's team Irrational Games shut down. Supposedly, Ken Levine didn't like the stress of managing such a large-scale project. A few years later, he and a small handful of the old team rebranded themselves as Ghost Story Games. It sounds like they're now working on other, much smaller projects. Ken Levine has indicated fairly clearly that he has no intention of returning to the Bioshock series, but that that doesn't mean a Bioshock sequel isn't happening. The series publisher 2K evidently has every intention of rebooting the franchise with or without Ken Levine. Supposedly, Bioshock has since been tossed around from one studio to another. But our best lead comes from the prophetic Jason Schreier, professional video game psychic who accurately leaks and predicts video game announcements on the regular. He claims that a new, yet-to-be-named studio has been quietly recruiting talent from across the industry to work on a top-secret project codenamed Parkside. Supposedly, this Parkside project is actually the next Bioshock, and according to Schreier, this project has been in the works since 2015. In other words, we really should see this soon. I can't promise it'll be this year or anything like that, but I do expect it to blindside a lot of fans. The fact that they're porting the past games to Switch suggests that they might be gearing up to kick this franchise back into gear soon. If they're really gonna reboot this franchise without Ken Levine, the biggest trial will be creating a new dystopia that can rival Ken Levine's marvels. Sure, they could just do Rapture or Columbia again, and maybe that could even be great, but it's been 7 years since the last Bioshock, and when it comes back, it needs to come back in a big way. The last thing it needs is to feel like more of the same, so provided they're building another dystopian metropolis, assuming the series' history is anything to go off of, we likely can't possibly guess what it is. Space seems too obvious, and both Prey and System Shock already have that covered. It's gonna have to be something off the wall. I don't know, like a city built inside a bioluminescent kaiju, or it always starts in a lighthouse, right? Rapture was far below it, Columbia was far above it. Maybe this time it's inside the lighthouse bulb, shrunk down to a microscopic state, like a city of glass and glowing copper wire that works as a near limitless energy source because the city is so small. It's probably futile to guess, but I think deep down, everyone knows what we all really want, and that is, of course, the city from the Mario Bros. Movie, the reptilian dystopia, all the weird versions of technology, alternate dimensions. Wait a minute, there are some real narrative parallels here, which fits too goddamn well if you know the Bioshock lore. Am I really the only one who sees it? Okay, if you think that idea sucks, or if you just have a good one of your own, leave your off-the-wall Bioshock setting submissions in the comments. The weirdest one gets 100 points. And if you enjoyed this video, check out my other content. For a small content creator like me, your like and or sub goes a long way. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.